welcome to another episode of Cultivate and Keep. I'm Corey. We got Jeremy with us, and we also have another special guest who will intro here in a second. Just really quick, wanted to say thanks for listening in. Quick announcement also, we are still working on our cultivateandkeep.com/favorites page of all of our favorite curated resources like books, podcasts, other websites. Actually, Chris, we'd love to have your input as well. We'll get some of that details later. But more things we can add to the site. So once again, it's at cultivateandkeep.com/favorites. And super excited to get going today. Jeremy, you want to give us a little intro?
Yeah, so today we have Chris George. Chris, welcome.
Thank you.
So I've known Chris pretty much my whole life. He is one of my dad's good friends, kind of like a second dad to myself. So known him for a while and have a lot of respect for him and want to have him on the show. How's that for an intro?
Glad to be here.
Really thought that one through.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think we'll go through our regular questions to kind of get it started. So CG, tell us about kind of your upbringing, your family, how you grew up, all that good stuff.
Grew up in San Diego. Grew up Catholic. Didn't come to know the Lord until I met Debbie, my wife, and moved. I think I was counting the other day. We did. We're not in the military and moved 18 times in 18 years.
Wow.
You know, obviously not once a year, but so had a little trouble making friends because I knew I was going to leave. So it, but all in East County, primarily short stint to Idaho and back. So, and grew up Catholic, twice a year, Easter and Christmas.
Now, I went to a workshop that you did at Foothills a few months ago, and you talked about kind of like your dad and how he raised you, and you made a few comments about like early on, like a few things that were kind of like ingrained in you about like being a man and what it means to be a father. And there was a comment you made about what was it, like about someone's shoes and like how like your dad saw someone with like a pair of shoes on, and he said like, Chris, whatever, like I think he said don't wear shoes like that, or your shoes matter. What did he say? Tell me about that.
That's surprising because that's like 12 months. It's over a year ago that and that you would remember it.
But that was the last retreat. Okay,
yeah, it was the last. It was one before last, and it's funny. I think it's a year ago for you, but I look back. I think I was 7. I'm 55, so that's 40 whatever years ago, and we're coming out of the Alpine Inn, and this guy's walking out with his hands in his pocket, walking out the door. Doesn't hold the door for one. So my dad's teaching me about holding the door. 2, he's got his hands in his pocket as he's walking, and get your hands out of your pocket, stand up straight. The whole 9 with, walking with confidence. My dad's trying to teach me. And then look at his heels, because his heels were super worn out on the outside edge of his shoes, and he wore dress shoes. And he says, if you're in sales or if you're in some form of business that involves other people, they judge appearance, and it looks like you don't take care of the details. And so that just stuck with me. The point I was making in that is just came up in a real performance environment, and that just stuck. I don't know. So it was a story I shared.
Yeah, I mean, I asked that because in that like workshop, you talked a lot about like from a young age, like the way you thought about life and like work. Like a big way of how you think now was framed by a lot of things your dad said when you were younger, and you kind of expanded a lot on that. I'm not sure if you remember, but I want to kind of start off with that, kind of like hear about basically the way you think now, the way you view work and being a man and providing. Kind of how was that shaped when you were younger, and how has it changed as you kind of developed through high school and a young adult and now?
So I think the good side of that was that my dad always worked really hard. My mom worked hard, and so I learned that work ethic, and that was has been super beneficial. It was veiled in and shrouded in a performance atmosphere, a performance sort of approval, if you will. So always striving, whether it was in sports or later in life in work. And then I found out in the relationships, the negative side of that was you can perform your way into relationships, but you can't maintain them. Or you can perform your way into a job by being somebody that can just excel out of the blocks and sprint, but you can't marathon, and you're not in it for the long haul, because inevitably life is very difficult and you're going to get gut checked. And so the talk was really about motives. I think it was the talk was called Striving for Humility, which is a bit of an oxymoron of every time I noticed in life my pattern where I was striving to accomplish something, maybe forcing a little bit or manufacturing circumstances or environment, or even I talk a lot about now lying, right? Lying's a big one, whether it's by omission or commission, and how we try to frame ourselves up into a certain perspective we want other people to see us. And I just, I found that every time I was caught in that loop, that pathetic loop of trying to perform my way into a favorable appearance, that there's always carnage that came along with that. And so breaking that cycle, and that was a talk a little bit, maybe covered a little bit later today, but that was some epiphanies that happened of why it's set down stuff, and just the one thing, stop lying. I said to myself, either to myself or to other people, about what I want them to think, or what I being aware of reality. It just lightens the load.
Yeah, interesting. Well, I'm curious because I think a lot of guys can relate with like the performance side of things, of always wanting to do good, or being motivated, by the appearance of success, or that you're doing well, or that you can impress someone like your father, or like your boss, or even your friends, and just feeling like a motivation inside of you to always want to succeed. It's sort of a double-edged sword sometimes, right? Where the performance side of things can really be a negative motivator, and it can push you to do things like, lie, or maybe puts you in a negative mindset, or maybe just the way that you handle yourself isn't the right way. Or like you said, maybe it's a sprint instead of a marathon attitude. In other ways, it could be used as maybe like a positive, and that it's a great motivator, and that it pushes you to do things maybe outside of your comfort zone, or it maybe even pushes you to be better. Do you find a balance somewhere in that, or how do you balance kind of the goods and bads of kind of the performance-based motivations?
I think if you unpack that a little bit, at 55, I've done it. I call myself a slow learner, because it's taken me a long time to figure some of these things out. And a couple of the big things in life that really just rocked my world about, you think you're so smart, positioning yourself to do this or do that and capitalize. I found there was compromise in that, and I'm thinking, at the end of the day, my relationships and my reputation, I thought I could risk it and get away with something, and this is not like earth-shattering stuff. This is speeding, or a corner in business, or something like that. And I just found that it is completely not worth it. And God just rocked me in a couple of boxes where things were in jeopardy, right? Reputation, and my own integrity. It was like this mirror that got shown to me of, that wasn't meant to cause malice or harm to anybody. That was just meant to maximize the situation. But what we mean, our intentions, and what reality is, there's a big gap. And it basically came down to, I didn't trust God. And I have this statement that we all want to trust Him until we have to. And it tried to override it and bring the human element into it. And I think talents, if you're talented as a young man, or even an older gentleman, that we rely on our talents too much than we do God, and to work out the circumstances. So He just rocked me with that. It was like, hey, kid, you're not listening to me, and you don't trust me, and I'm going to slow you down. And so,
do you mind giving an example of? I think there's a few like I can think of, but do you mind like giving some examples of how that played out?
Expand that a little bit.
Well, I'm thinking of that one business. I think it was a dealership you opened probably 10 years ago. I think. Like, I'm thinking about times where you have basically tried to hone in your own skills, and God kind of pulling the reins back and saying like, now's not the time, or trust me a little more. And kind of like, when was a time where it basically didn't work out in your favor, and you had to learn the hard way?
So I've always had, or for the most part, I'm going to say always, most of the time I've had favor and success in business. And so in 2007 we moved back from Oregon, from San Diego, moved to Eugene, Oregon, Cottage Grove, and then moved back in 07, moved in 96, came back in 07. Couldn't get a job down here, had my life savings, and so multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars, not millions, but it was a lot of money. I saved 40 years for this, and I lost it all in about 18 months. And so I opened this business in the car business, which I know the industry, but I wasn't capitalized. The 07 recession hit. Just everything that could have went wrong did go wrong. And so I'm sitting there. I'm sitting there with my wife, Debbie, and we shut the doors down. We got out of our lease, thank God. I owed about $100,000 in debt, and I lost everything I had. And so we're sitting in our garage. We put up these garage sale signs, and we got stuff. Just loads of people picking through our stuff, buying the things from the business and some of the things that we just said, hey, we need to sell to eat, to pay rent.
Wow.
I was renting a house then, and that's 10 years ago. And I'm just thinking, I thought I got good counsel. I thought I heard from God, and I was so far off the mark. Like I wasn't either honest with myself, and I did get counsel. So I don't know, it's just life and its circumstances, but I knew I trusted my own abilities too much. So I did get input, but but I'd never been out on my own, and I wasn't capitalized to the point I should have been to go do that. And I thought, yeah, I can do this. I've done it before and not. So.
I mean, I kind of want to unpack that because I'm in like a similar spot. We've been like coming from a place. So me and my wife got married recently, and now like taking kind of entrepreneurial steps and taking risks. And so I'm super like fascinated to learn like what went wrong. Basically, what could someone young like me avoid that you did? But it sounds like you're saying you had counsel. You had like it all looked good, but it turned out not. Are you saying it was because of just like life circumstances, like life happened to you, or do you feel like you possibly, made a mistake and you should have gotten better counsel, or were you missing something,
So I was in automotive retail, and I was in the new car dealership side for a decade or better, a couple decades, where I was running stores. And so I came down, I can run this store. What I wasn't willing to do, and what ultimately God brought me back to, I wasn't willing to go back to what it takes to build a business, like meet and greet that customer on the asphalt. I would, go buy cars, and then I'd hire people to do this stuff. I should have ran it more like on a shoestring. I should have tightened it up, and I needed to be able to rake back to, and I wanted to grow faster than I had the capital to grow, so I could live the lifestyle I was accustomed to living. And in that striving to build it quicker and to staff it up sooner than it could support it, it was a bad business decision. So, and a bad business practice, and ultimately, I wind up losing all my money, and I wind up selling all the stuff out of our garage. I look over at Debbie and said, I got to go down and apply for a job. So I went down and applied for a job at BMW South County, and said, hey, can I sell cars? And went all the way, and I finally wound up getting raked back all the way to where I started, which selling cars, 25 years earlier.
You kind of answered this, but what would you say to someone, like what would you say to yourself, 10 years ago, like now, what would you say to someone like wanting to take a step like you did? Like how would you advise someone?
The guy asked me the other day, we had coffee at Starbucks, and he's saying, hey, what about this, and this? And I'm thinking that needs to be a side hustle. So go get a job and make that your side hustle, and you're going to grind it out.
Make the idea the side hustle.
Make the idea the side hustle, and do that for, like Corey's starting his web. He's got his job, and he's doing this after hours. He built it on Saturday or whatever you did. That in your, that's your side. That's your grind on the side, and don't have illusions of grandeur, because things takes twice as long as you think they're going to do, and we're going to make mistakes. But especially if you're married and you have some responsibilities, you got to provide, right? You got to put food on the table and pay the rent and do the deal. So make that the side hustle.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, it reminds me of something I heard recently, but it's so simple, concise. Someone just said, hope isn't a strategy. I think that's where like so many of us go wrong in so many different ways. It cascades even beyond business. But you get excited about something, or you think you can, and you get wrapped up in your own talents or ambitions, and you think, I can go do that, or I can take this leap, or I can take this risk. It's worth it. It'll work out. I'll figure it out. But hope, it really doesn't pay the bills. It really doesn't work out every way that you want it to, always. And so you have to be very realistic. You need to have the counsel. You need to have the things in place, but also you need to, like you said, de-risk it. It doesn't have to be your full-time thing all the time, or it doesn't have to be the most, kind of romanticized risk and crazy story in the end. It can be a very conservative, thought out, kind of step-by-step, slow process. And you get maybe a better result in the end. But that's a good story.
Yeah.
Appreciate you sharing.
I wanted to ask about like the time frame and the process for climbing back up, because you said that was like a pretty big failure, and then you went back and got a job. So what was like, how long were you a floor salesman to kind of where you are now? Like, how long did that process take?
It seemed like forever in the time. So I can remember going to work every day, and it's so thankful I had the job, and not really sure how I was going to make ends meet and pay the bills. And within 12 or 14 months, I was running a dealership again. That was just completely out of the blue. 2010, November 17th, I remember the day that I get offered the job to run a store again, a new car franchise in California, which I couldn't get that job for the 3 previous years trying to get it. And so
was that
there's
Kia?
an 18-month gap of, say again?
Was that at Kia?
At Kia.
Where you started?
Yeah.
Were you working at Kia or no?
No, no. I was working for another group in town for their Toyota store and their Honda store. And the same company that owned the BMW store, they transferred me. And I knew the guy that, so that job working for the Toyota Honda store took me to Palm Springs. Knew the guy from Oregon that bought a store in Palm Springs. And I happened to run into him when I was down there because I was doing work for these other stores. And he said, "Hey, what are you doing?" I said, waiting and looking, being patient, doing what I need to do right now. He said, "Well, call me if you ever have an idea." And driving by, and this Kia store went up for sale, and it sold, and it fell out of escrow, and I heard it fell out of escrow. I called him, and I said, "Hey, it's available." He said, "I'll be right down. I'll look at it." So he flew down and said, "Will you run it?" And I said, "You going to buy it?" And he said, "Yeah, if you run it." So that was it. But that was 18 months of like desert, right? Wilderness walking. And
pretty literally.
Yeah, it's very, I'm just so grateful in so many boxes looking back that, and then God's restored, right? God is over time restored, but it's that Matthew principle stuff, are you willing to grind it out? And
so you were doing like a job you didn't want to do. Were you making decent money, or were you guys like barely skating by with that sales job?
I didn't think it was doing okay. I was putting in the hours, and I was selling some cars, and but God just gave me favor, and He blessed. We stayed faithful with tithing, and He just blessed and provided. There wasn't this massive abundance, but it was way more than what I thought I was making, and it's what we needed. And then doors opened up through that. Yeah. So it was so humbling to go back to the sales floor after being a general manager of a multi-million-dollar facility. So it's He provided in every box.
Yeah. Also wanted to ask, how did you manage like that letdown with like Debbie and with like the family? Like, how do you share with your wife kind of like what happened? Like basically like the whole opportunity kind of being squandered. Like, how do you manage that with your wife?
Yeah.
Corey's like, yeah.
Oh, I'm curious. I mean, I can't even imagine. I'm just trying to put myself in your shoes.
So I wouldn't say I wasn't off golfing and what can we say on this podcast? Screwing around. I was, I was working. So I wasn't doing everything I should be doing in every box. It'd be like your dad in the landscaping business having to go back to mowing lawns. Yeah. So I wasn't out there face to face. And so I was working day in and day out and doing the deal. And she saw that. And she's gracious, for one. And two, it's like I think there was grace because I was truly like undone. God just did this work in my heart and just really got to me at my core of who my identity was. And so I think in that she was just gracious in that. So I thank God for that.
Yeah. I'm not sure, Corey. I've kind of been asking a lot, so let
Yeah.
you jump in.
Well, I mean, speaking of Debbie, could you tell us a little bit about, how you guys met, how you got married? I think you sort of mentioned briefly that, she was maybe part of the reason or looped into how, you also became a Christian as well. Do you kind of just want to back us up into your marriage?
We both were in a wedding together. She met this girl in high school, and this girl she met and my best friend. So I was the best man. She was in the wedding party. And she just graduated from college, lived in Hollister. She wanted to move down to San Diego, or she moved down to San Diego, and then we wound up moving in together. And about, I don't know, somewhere between, I think, a year, my time might be a little off, we wound up going to church and getting saved. And
After you were married? Or
after we were married,
okay.
got engaged, got saved, both real close to that, became Christians, moved out from living together to be separate, got absolute blowback from the parents because it's like, this doesn't make any sense. And both sides are Catholic. And so anyways, wound up just really getting plugged in and so got married and got introduced through our friends and being in that wedding together, and then came to the Lord, and then got plugged in and walked that deal out. So yeah, so they introduced us actually, and then we were both in the wedding party.
Wow, that's amazing. Married. So I mean, how did you end up going to church and getting plugged in? And I mean, what was the experience like to being Catholic and then going to I'm assuming a Christian church and then becoming a Christian, and what the kind of transition of faith was like?
God's seeds are interesting, right? So I move out of my house when I can't remember, 21 or 2, and I move in, and I have this roommate, and he's a Christian going to Horizon, and then I got nothing. I want nothing to do with that. I wound up meeting Debbie, and if I back up a little bit, I'd ask this guy, Greg, what about this? What about that? I'd start asking questions. He said, you ought to go. So I went back to Horizon back in the day when Miles was high school pastor up there, and Mike McIntosh was the pastor. So I tried that a couple of times, and there's like something here, right? This is real. And then when Debbie and I were introduced and we were living together, and one day I woke up and I said, you know what, we need to go to church. And wasn't a Christian, but just knew, I was convicted. And she said, okay, let's go to a Catholic church. I said, hold on, let's. So actually, I think we actually did. We tried Mass at a couple places. It's like, never mind. So, and then we wound up going to Horizon, and then that from there on it stuck, and that's how we both came to the Lord. So,
wow.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious too, because it seemed like there was seeds, right? You said that God kind of plants them mysteriously, but you didn't want anything to do with them. I mean, what was the change of heart to where you were convicted, or you woke up one day and you felt like this needs to be a part of our lives, or there's something here? I mean, what do you think that God was doing in your heart? What were you experiencing that you knew, like, we need this? There's something real here.
I don't know how to duplicate it, but there are 2 times in my life. One, after I met Debbie in that wedding, I woke up and I knew I was going to marry her. That was one. And the second thing, as we're living together, one day I just woke up and I just knew. I knew we were supposed to be at church. And so there was no bells or light opening coming through the clouds or anything like that. It was just like, I know this is wrong, and deep down. And coming up Catholic, there was like no exposure to that, right? They didn't talk about stuff we talked about in church about relationships and staying pure and all that. So it was foreign to me, but I knew it was wrong. So
yeah,
that's how we wound up going.
Yeah, it's so interesting to me, like how the Lord speaks and convicts people in such different ways. For some, they fight and they struggle, or it's just a really long, arduous process of years and years and years of in and out. And then for some, maybe people who are more decisive, or it's just how God calls you. It can be the day that you wake up.
I think we all have different proclivities or propensities to do certain things. I've been so slow to learn in the business field. To me, it seems so slow. And we're in the relationship with God, and in us going to church, it was that like one day to the next. But this has been like a lifetime, and I don't feel like I'm done. We're just working out the places where I'm holding on too tight.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm also curious. I mean, with all your business experience, going from managing, whole dealerships to selling on the floor. I mean, what do you think that your like strengths are? And I'm also curious too if you can back up a little bit about like how you got into the business or why be in this business and what attracts you to it.
So I went to work straight out of I went to 2 years of Grossmont Junior College, C&D student, played baseball, wasn't good enough to go pro, and realized that, and then said, hey, I need to go to work. My dad was in the car business, so I got a job at a store he used to work at because I knew some of the guys changing oil, and I saw the lifestyle, so I saw what afforded some of them, and I'm thinking I'm not going to go to school and I can make some money. And I worked hard at it when I was young, so I was relatively proficient at it. And then it just evolved into like one of the greatest businesses in the world, being you get to solve people's problems in the transportation arena. Whether it's getting financed or, hey, I'm looking for this car, or hey, my son needs this car, or whatever. It's just you get to interact with people on a level that is fun and be a part of something that's the second biggest investment in their life for most people. And so the people became the big part of it now. I don't know much about cars, but I know a lot about people, and I love marketing. And so marketing and promotion, and then really the relationships that can be formed. We have these. I would have these customers come in like every week and have coffee. Right, we'd sit down and have coffee and hang out. And some of my heroes, and one of them's passed on now, but it's like life and community. So being as a kid, I can remember how cool to be in the Mother Goose Parade. Now, silly, right? And people that don't live in El Cajon again, what the heck's a Mother Goose Parade? But I'm thinking, hey, be part of the community, be able to contribute, be a supporter, and provide jobs. And then the people that work for you, are driving the community. They're buying houses and having kids and building families. And that's the part, I think, the community part that really intrigued me.
Huh. Yeah, super interesting. I'm curious too because, with all the different personality types, and this is something that you've introduced, I think both of us to about what your strengths are, strength finders, like you said, just different kind of tendencies or the way that that you operate. I mean, where do you feel like you fit in this type of business? Like, what do you bring to the table that makes you so intrigued with people and maybe the psychology behind it, or but also like what's your style? I guess I'm kind of asking.
I'm going to try to answer. There's two things that I'm just super passionate about. One's people's potential. So I started out, I think I spent my 20s looking for a mentor, and really because I wanted to live up to my potential. I felt like I had more inside of me, and I wanted to do more, and I couldn't find anybody to learn from or glean from. So as I've aged, and I've said, I see a lot of young guys with just tons of talent, right? Sitting in there. Latent talent's just a waste, right? It's like, all right, how do we get that out of there? And so that is like, so how do you do that? And I think doing that through business, you used to do it when you're in high school in sports, right? You'd play sports together, basketball, football, baseball. And you guys, it's this fraternity that you won together, lost together, you grew together, you matured together, you accomplished together. And now to me, it's in the world of business and relationships and community. And so that's really, can we, hire somebody that is, at whatever point they are in their life, and can we help facilitate to get them better? Can we challenge them with some questions to reach their potential? To me, it's like watching your kids grow up and actually mature and grow. And second from that, in the family, I don't know anything more rewarding.
Yeah.
Does that answer the question?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's such an interesting perspective, especially as someone who does hire and employ a lot of people, because I think most from an employee's perspective, I think that most people view their boss as like, I'm just here to get my job done or just to kind of fill a spot. Maybe for most employers too, they might think, well, I just need a job done. Here's what you do. But to actually think of hiring someone as, I'm going to help you in your journey in life, not just in this job, in this setting, or just getting this thing done. Okay, it's done. Here's your check. But also, how can we build you? How can we improve you? How can we help you realize your potential? Where do you think that I mean, was that something that you've always had, or is that something that developed over time?
So I can't. If I go back to my exposure at Horizon and Debbie and that whole story of coming to the Lord was really 2 years prior to that. I had a guy invite me to an Amway convention, and I was super interested in that for a number of reasons, which doesn't really matter. But so I went to this deal, and the guy that on Sunday morning gives an altar call. It's a business meeting, how to build the business, how to get your wife home from work, etc. I'm intrigued because, for a number of other reasons, but he gives this altar call the next day, and I wind up actually accepting the Lord there at an Amway convention. And then it gets reinforced. So that was one of the seeds. It gets reinforced at Horizon. And but I remember him talking about, being willing to do the work, right? So as men, I think being willing to, it's not buying the business Jeremy just did, or you launching the business you just launched a couple Saturdays ago, or even the 50-second podcast you guys are doing. It's the process, right? That's forging into you guys. Like, you can do this if you stick in it for the long haul. And you're not really sure how strong you are or what you're really made of until we walk through those hard things together, or even independently. And so in that, I watch these young men or women that grow and have this potential and have a bit of a hunger, and maybe didn't have the tools or the platform. And I've been fortunate to be put in place where we can hire them and teach them and train them, and hopefully some of it sticks, where they have tools and a platform to find out what their gifts are so they could thrive. I don't see anything better than that. I mean, at the end of the day, over the next 15 years, if all we do is sell cars, we're going to come up way short and fail if we don't invest in people, or you rent tables, or you do, whatever in social media marketing, social marketing. If we don't, if it's not the relationship and add value in relationships, we're just going to come up way short.
Yeah. Yeah. So, where do you see, one of the things I'm really curious about, I'm sure Jeremy is too, and in the world of business, I mean,
Corey, you are really curious.
I am really curious always, and I always have to.
You
let
always
people
start
know
with that. I'm really curious to know.
A lot of guys are in the world of business, and I think basically everyone is in some capacity because you have a job, and jobs are the product of a business. Where do you see the intersection of faith and business, and how does that play a part in the way that you see the world of business and do business with other people?
We're at, if you're in most jobs, you're going to be, if it's full time, you're 40 hours a week, right? You're 173 hours a month, and or more. And so we've got 8 hours of the prime time of the day that we're spending with people that aren't our family or friends or close friends. And so I know somebody that through work has just morphed, just completely. People that have gone to church, prayers have been answered, reconciliation, gotten out of financial trouble, not from what they've earned, but from some decisions. So there's this opportunity to live life next to each other, and so the kingdom, part of work is walking next to somebody across the parking lot and getting real quick. Back to the lying thing, back to the transparent, and back to the vulnerability. You guys are better at it than most. You ask good questions, but it's being able to stay real and get real quickly, and encourage others. It gives them permission to do the same with you. So there's opportunities for ministry all over the place, and so all that time at work, there's just this. We're praying. We just started praying for the store, right? 9 weeks ago, we started praying on Friday mornings, 8:00. And
the management team, or
whoever wanted to come, a couple people invited. So there's somewhere between 5 and 8 people that show up every week. I don't invite because I felt like, hey, that might be pressure. So you guys can come or not, and it's on work time. And but we inevitably wind up playing for this lady's kids and this lady's marriage and this young man's best friend that just died and his family that's left behind. And it's the people, right? The business is the people.
Yeah.
The community is the people.
I also wanted to ask, kind of along the same lines, but how do you balance I would say like integrity like in the workplace, because I mean you like manage a team of salesmen, and I feel like the car business is notorious for like kind of, I mean, you could sell clients cars or services that they don't need, right? Like, so how do you like manage a team of non-believers to kind of do the right thing when it matters, especially when it means like earning less money? How do you do that?
So that there's on the used cars, it's super easy, and we implemented this about 5 years ago. There's a tool that we use. I can tell you what every 2015 Toyota Tacoma is selling for up to 1,000 miles with this amount of money. And so we price ourselves to be in the top 5 best price, period. And so all my issues, it was really hard before. It was really hard because you would run into those disparities in pricing. Now it's on this like even playing field, and I think the internet's helped that because it gives people power and information. So we do that, and we actually share that up front, or we're supposed to share it up front. So that does it. So you got to stick to that. Then we put limits on some of the other products that could be really exorbitant, or you could. And so we put these maxes on it, and if you can't exceed the max. And then on the new car side, there's so much information. It's just I don't know that it's self-governing, but it's better because of that you can find the invoice, you can find true car and what the average car is selling for. And so it's sort of governed in our industry. Mm-hmm. That's a whole different question, though, from like how do we treat people and build relationships and value what I value? Because there's 5-6 specific values, and not everybody does. So that'd be Shangri-La. You know, that's the goal.
I also wanted to ask you, I know a lot of people like go to you to buy cars because they know you, and I'm imagining a lot of people look for deals or hookups and wanting to buy a car. And so I find myself now in a pretty similar spot, like a lot of people getting married and wanting hookups on wedding stuff. And I've never thought it'd be hard, but it's really hard, like find that balance between like helping someone, but at the same time, like I have to eat, I have to make money, And so like, what's that balance of like doing favors and, giving discounts, and what's the balance of like making money when it comes to people that you know?
It's a great question. So recently I had somebody from church say, hey, they're looking for this, what can I buy it for? And I said, hey, we took this car in what I'm good with personally, and it took me a long time to get there. Well, there's two measurements. Is one, knowing the market. Like, so if I take in a Toyota Tacoma that's worth $20,000 and I take it in for 15, there's nothing, and it's worth 20 grand. There's nothing wrong selling for 20. But if I take it in for 22, I'm not going to ask 24. I'm going to ask 20. I made a mistake. I either made a good buy or I didn't. Mm-hmm. So I'm good with whatever the market is plus $500. So, and I just tell them, I said, I'm going to make $500. And frequently we take stuff in on the market. So there's exceptions. So you could pick this apart, but there's this particular car we put $4,000 in it. I said, you can have it for $4,500 plus whatever it needs in the shop. Tires are, and you can govern what it needs. So now my hands are clean, right? And that's the market on the car. So whatever that stuff rents for, or in my business, whatever it sells, hey, I don't want to buy a warranty, or maybe you're pro warranty or not in the auto business because, well, your dad's not anti-warranty, right? So that's cool. 6 out of 10 people buy them, and I tell that when customers come in, that 6 out of 10 people buy them. It's just like insurance. You use it, you're going to get your money back. You don't use it, you're not going to get your money back. So if you got the $3,000 or $4,000 to fix a car when that happens, then don't buy it, right? Save your money because you may not need it. If you're concerned about that and you want to put it in your payment or you want to pay for it, then do it. So just being, what would you do, right? What would you do? And I'm good at a nickel, and I know businesses need to make money. So we don't win them all, and that's the effort we try. So we really try to just be clean so nobody's second guessing what they did.
That's a good idea. That's really good. I want to switch gears a little bit, and this is something that I think that you've really instilled in me, especially, but I know for Jeremy, but it's also been more like, that his dad has done for him too, but on the planning side of things, and having goals, thinking long-term and sort of strategically. I don't know. What's your process for planning and for setting goals, and how do you think about it for yourself?
So I'm in I would say an unusual. It's always been like every year. Here's your list of goals. Here's your list of books, and let's go to work. And 2 years ago, I think I did. It was 48 or 49 books. Super frustrated though because I can't retain any of it or very little. So this last year,
It's because you're getting old, Chris.
that is true, ginkgo. So this last year is like I'm going to read 5 or 6 and I'm going to really study them. So I started changing that. But it's the same, and as the seasons change, the stuff evolves. So once the same deal is make a list of goals. I'm working on something right now. Make a list of goals at the beginning of the year. I actually like doing it in October, so it's not all full of hype, and you can kind of think it out. What I'm working on right now is it's called a future authoring program, and it's actually by Jordan Peterson, 12 Rules for Life. So you write about your past, you write about your present, you write about your future, and it's just kind of changing. What do you want to be instead of what do you want to get, or what do you want to do instead of which could be lose 10 pounds, or it could be, I want to, go to Italy and walk across Italy like Dan did. So that's been one of the practices as of recent. So still a big book list, always ears out for books. Fascinated by Peterson right now and his 12 Rules for Life. So YouTube almost every day. One of the things I try to do every day is Luke 2:52. It says, and Jesus grew in wisdom and stature and favor with God and man. So wisdom, knowledge, stature physically, favor with God, which is relationship with God. And so speaking to us, right? And then relationship with man. And so in those 4 boxes, to invest in those 4 boxes daily, because cumulative over time, it just compounds, even if it's 10 minutes. So even 10 minutes of physical, or even 10 minutes, quiet time, prayer, meditation. And you couple that, the Luke 4:52 verse, with rule number 8 is don't lie, or at least tell the truth. In Peterson's book, you couple with that 2 things, it'd be a game changer for the year. So I think the 10 minutes in each box keeps you growing and progressing and relevant, and also stimulates ideas, because you get to the reading creates conversation and activity in the learning realm.
Yeah. So for 2 young bucks like Jeremy and I, 24, early in our careers, ambitious, not really where we want to be, like still, there we see the hill ahead of us, and I think we have an idea of the goals or the places we want to be. What would your advice be for someone like us in our ability to plan and try to work to get there?
So I don't know, we haven't talked in a while, so somebody that could speak into your life in those 4 boxes, or one person that could speak in all 4, or 4 people. But I think at the end of the day, and for guys to be intentional in those 4 arenas, most guys are one-dimensional, right? They're maybe 2 at best. They're really good relationally, and maybe physically, but they're horrible in business or have no spiritual life. Or you're really spiritual and you have no financial. You're not thriving in the financial arena, because we're not working on it, right? I mean, so those 4 things, if there was 10 minutes in each of those boxes as a daily diet, to affirm your wife, to affirm your kids, to affirm those that you love, your friends, right? To invest in your spiritual relationship with the Lord, physically, and then something in business. Some, either your extreme ownership or your pick something in business that you can press into. You do anything for 10 minutes a day and do 4 of that. You're done before, if you're up at 6, you're done before 6:45. And that consistently over time does a couple of things. It makes you grow. You can't stand still. You cannot grow internally and stand still externally. It's just not possible. There's obviously seasons and rhythms, but if you're growing internally with ideas and knowledge and leadership concepts, and you have the activator trait, you guys do. You guys think of things and you do them. You have that activator trait. You can't stand still externally and grow internally. So that cumulative effect in those 4 boxes will round you out as a husband, as a father, as a friend, as a son, or as a daughter, in ways that make life full. So,
Yeah. I like that answer because something that I've been thinking about is like it's really good to cast the vision, or to think about the things you want to do or be, or places you want to go, but also like you need the daily, like, let me just take this tiny microscopic step towards that every day. And like, what are the things I can do every day to get there in 5, 10, 15 years? Because in reality, it's not like these really big leaps and bounds that get us to where we want to be. It's just daily kind of grinding it out, the habits, the things that you do that are really these tiny steps that just compound over time. So I think that's really important.
Yeah.
I also wanted to kind of get you going on like this topic of like male leadership, and you've been talking a lot recently about like as the man rises, the family rises, and as the man falls, the family falls. I want to hear your thoughts. Like, just kind of share what's on your mind about that.
It's a moral. We have a moral responsibility. This is a Peterson, to be everything we were built to be. And there is such discouragement, shame, guilt, frustration, self-imposed and others imposed on men, from their wives, from their moms, from pick something, from society right now, of where we have retracted into almost being irrelevant in the eyes of many, and we are responsible to lead, and we're responsible to be strong, and we're responsible. We need to produce. We need to progress, and if we're not rising as a dad or a husband, then it's hard anyways, because of just the nature of what's going on in society, and how they affect the women in the house. It's like I said recently, I said, you know what? We as men don't need to go home and compete in our own house. And so, but we've abdicated, and we've sedated ourselves with maybe it's TV, maybe it's pornography, a sexually deficient house. You're going to either have porn or you're going to have masturbation. Neither of them are good. Both bad. Not good outcomes. Maybe it's Xbox. Maybe it's softball games at 40 years old. And none of that, not none of that. Softball games at 40 is not bad, but disproportionately. So, back to the one-dimensional growth issue, or hey, I'm a weekend warrior and that's all I do. That's bad. That's in somebody in their extended adolescence still reliving high school, and that's bad. And so we need to rise up and to be productive, and to be powerful, and to progress, and to impact. And it's hard when you're not respected at the house, or if you're, blended marriages. Super hard, right? You can't talk to my kids this way. You can't discipline her kids, and they're his kids. Very, very, very difficult. So not insurmountable, but definitely not easy. And the whole concept with Peterson that I love so much is life is suffering, and you probably are not going to be less fearful of what you're fearful now, but you could get braver by facing the fears, facing the things that you struggle with. And so just from the sedation standpoint, if we just, I saw in your book list, right, a great book is Atomic Habits. Take the TV off the wall if you can't stop watching it. Unplug it, and only plug it in if you know what program you're going to watch, so we don't default to just mindless numbing over time. So that whole concept, again, go to Luke 2:52. If I did those 4 things every day, if I did them for 30 days, so anybody that's listening and said, I'm going to do that for 30 days, I'm going to get up at 6 instead of 7, I'm going to get up at 5 instead of 6, and did those 4 things 10 minutes each. Walk till you sweat, 10 minutes, 5 minutes out, 5 minutes back, and do 10 minutes in prayer and meditation, and did 10 minutes in affirmations or something that would build your relationships in your family, and then 10 minutes in the business field, you would transform how you looked and felt about life, and you would start to feel like, and then you could start to accelerate stuff. You take the concept where, hey, we're going on vacation. The day before we go, we can get so much done. We're so efficient because we are laser focused. So we can't run at that 24/7, but we could run it with the consistent little things that you said earlier, Corey, of the 10-minute, the four things, because that thing cumulatively will accelerate our results. At the same time, you shut down the negative things, right? The stuff that's sedating us into a numbness because we don't want to deal with reality, alcohol, drugs, etc. That is, and so we're deficient in that. They're just, as a society, we're deficient. It's not a respected spot in no, I was going to say for most women. That's not an accurate statement, but there's many that don't respect the man. There's many, or the role of the father, and it's critical. It's so. We just talked about this last week in church.
Sorry, thought my mic was off. That's good. Thank you for sharing. When I was at that workshop that you did, I think 3 weeks ago, I think I told Corey, but I was like super inspired by just kind of what you said. I think you're dead on, especially about like competing at the home, like with your wife. I mean, I've only been married 6 months now, but I can totally, like when you said that, I was like, oh my gosh, he's like dead on. That totally happens. I think I shared that with you too. And you were like, yeah, like, I've seen myself like competing with Connie with like small, silly things that don't matter. And so I think I can understand, like, I mean, imagine throwing kids in the mix 10, 15 years down the road, how that can complicate and be so much more of like a bigger issue. So I think you sharing that is like good to ponder and think about. So thank you for being real.
One thing on that before you move on.
Mm-hmm.
That all right?
Yeah.
Is I think, well, for me, I made a transition from needing my wife's approval and needing her acceptance, and I felt like I needed her love and attention, to wanting it. And I think the difference from that, it'll still create conflict if it's not there. So this is not like, hey, it goes away. But need is a victim mentality. And I did that myself. I said, I'm not going to do that. I want that, and I'm going to be honest enough to tell her, hey, these are some of the things I need or want in our relationship. And then engage in a conversation, not out of something that just triggers me to get into this state where I only respond out of anger, where it's like confronting what is true, right? I mean, there's certain things that I want in our relationship, and moving from that. Otherwise, I'd let it stew and bake and marinate, and it would sit in there and it would fester. And I can't tell you how many guys at 50, 55, 60 were, poof, the wife's gone, the husband's gone, because that stuff does not get dealt with. And I think it happens when we're 25 or 4, where you guys are, because it's like, and the other thing is, I think we love it, especially men and women love it different, like how I love Debbie and how she loves me, and not the love languages thing, but just to be able to communicate. And when you start talking about, I want your love, or I want your acceptance, or I want you, intimacy in the bedroom, or pick something, those are like vulnerable spots that we put ourselves out there and we could be rejected, right, by our closest person in life to us now. So not for the faint of heart, but so necessary to shift so we don't play the victim, and we address that head on. Just, I think it's an important distinction.
Yeah, that's good. Thanks for sharing. Do you want to start to wrap up soon? A few more questions, Corey?
Yeah.
Let's see here. I want to ask this question. How would you say you have grown or changed personally, just kind of over time, maybe more recently? Like, what are just some things that have changed in the way you think?
So I can repeat what Debbie told me recently, is how growing up performance-based and trying to build a business and trying to grow it, it was always setting goals, planning, expanding, which are all things are good, but relationships got in the way. Either people would get in the way, or relationships, or both. And so I created a lot of carnage, and so God really revealed that to me in these last two situations where I value the relationship as more than the outcome. So how to and so back to the reputation and back to humanizing the in the workplace, right, specifically, but it affected my wife too. So but in the where so I've really felt like it's shifted my heart where I'm more gracious, a little bit more tolerant, slower to firm with people, but slower to do some of the things I did. I would just go right through people if they were in the way what the goal was, and that's not healthy. And my wife paid for it because I was just so driven, and by the grace of God, she's still with me.
If you could go back to have a heart-to-heart talk with the 18-year-old CG, what would you tell him? I have a guess. Patience.
Yeah, I don't know if you're 18 and you can have patience.
It's a good point. I don't know about being 25 having patience, huh, Corey?
No, zero patience.
The other thing I don't really believe in, I heard it in the conversation today, is balance. I don't really believe in balance either. But
What do you mean by that?
well, I just don't think you balance things. I mean, I think there's seasons, and so I'm going to try to balance my schedule. And Covey's got the perfect one. First things first, right? Stephen Covey is you put in the four things, all the other stuff's gravel and sand. If you put in the four things, everything else is gravel and sand. So you might take your 10 minutes in the four boxes, but when it comes to relationship, to edifying and blessing your wife, that because it's dinner or flowers or a book or a card, it might be a half hour, right, that day. But I just think it's those four boxes. Balance is like the other thing I said in that workshop. So I think that's a misnomer, right? It's a wrong paradigm. Is work on the four things. The other thing I said, I think it was actually looked it up, is find the thing you love and you never work a day in your life. I'm thinking that's crazy. That's the craziest statement on the planet. Who came up with that? So I don't know anybody who does that. Whoever does that is a lucky and blessed man or woman. Godspeed. But the 99% of the rest of us, we're going to get up and we're going to toil. And that's the deal. So I think that is a misconception out there. So the two things I'd say is don't lie, right? Don't lie, Chris. Don't lie to yourself. Don't try to pretend to be something you're not, to validate yourself or the mentor. Let somebody speak into your life. So it's those two things. Because you're going to be impatient at 18, 20, 25, or 30. But you got a guy that's 30, 35, or 40. He's going to be able to speak. He's going to be able to give us perspective.
Yeah. What are the books that you gift or recommend the most? Or if you could only pick a few, which are the ones that are the must-reads?
Extreme Ownership. 12 Rules for Life by Peterson. And then I really like, it's a hard read. Two of them I really like is 7 Habits of a Highly Effective People and Switch on Your Brain by Dr. Caroline Leaf. Those four, really hung up on Peterson's book right now. And then obviously Jocko's book is just that's solid stuff. And he and Peterson just did an interview together. If you haven't seen it on YouTube, you should check it out.
I haven't.
Solid stuff about being fearful in life. And
you read his whole book, right? Peterson's?
Couple times.
Really? Because it's like the Bible, right, Corey? I mean, it's
thick.
It's dense.
Definitely thick.
That's why I haven't read it. It kind of scares me away.
So I got about halfway through, and then I stopped. I think I might have I was reading like one chapter like every other day, just kind of like blowing through it, and I think I just burned myself out a little bit. But I'm curious also, like, why those books, or what about them that you feel like so strongly about them?
It's like the epitome of, I think, whatever every dude says, like Jocko is like, the extreme ownership is like, a man's man, right? Facing fears and conquering new territories and literally defending our country and leading these people at such a high level of, there's an area of what is perceived, I don't know them, but what I read and what I sense, where it's like, I'm responsible for that. Is nobody else responsible for that? The superiors have a silly, insignificant request, but that's a request, and I'm responsible to give it to them. That's that's in the book. And that guy's life, so it's like the ultimate in responsibility, because it's life and death. And then Peterson is the same thing. Is, he stand up straight, right? Put your shoulders back and walk, and don't lie, or at least tell the truth, or treat, make sure your kids don't do things that other people don't like, or that you don't like. So, because if they do things you don't like, other people won't like it. Very basic, but it all comes down to responsibility and how hard life is, right? Everything's a grind. Everything's a grind. And so if there's meaning and purpose, I love Peterson's deal. It's not happiness we're after, it's meaning. And how do we get meaning? Is we lean into the responsibility. Whether you're a bricklayer, a carpet cleaner, brain scientist, to do it with excellence. And I see excellence in both those men in what they read about. We don't obviously know them up close, or what they write about and talk about. So it's the responsibility and the excellence factor, which I think every guy can like wicked relate to. Of, I want to be that guy. He's respected by other men, and I think we want to be respected. Would like to have it start in the home first. So we need to lead out, and they appear to be doing it.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah, I love both those guys.
Okay, I'll read it.
Convinced.
So YouTube, my trick is every morning when I'm shaving, you pop on a video, and it's got the rules. And so you click it, and so you get his version in a conversation. I listen to it on Audible, but then I've reinforced it so the second time through is with YouTube.
Cool. Who do you look up to?
Besides Jocko and Jordan
so
Peterson.
actually that's who I wrote down. But I think, I was really intrigued on Father's Day when Jim Dealing did the message, pastor at Foothills Christian Church. And I think because I know a little background about him and how good he is with his grandkids. And the guy makes knives, for goodness sake. So he's just a man's man.
This, yeah.
He dumpster dives with his grandkids. I mean, he just is and they love it. And it's like, he just has got a clan. He's developed this clan. Mark and Dave for leading out in the church, and loving, and creating this community. I don't know. There's just a bunch of people that do these things quietly. They've taken responsibility. They put one foot in front of the other, and they're making a difference in their community. Mm-hmm. And it's so I'm gonna miss some. I know it, but Dan Dealing, right, at the being the principal of Foothills, and just some of the stuff he does, and his heart for kids, and there's a lot of, and not famous because I don't really know those people. The people that I know that are doing things and changing lives are people you walk by at Albertsons.
Yeah.
And what do you look forward to in the future?
Yeah. So I really am praying about my calling. So I know what my career has been, transitioning to calling, and how to be more intentional about that. Really, I want to see the kingdom move in and through the workplace. So how I can come along either in my business, the business I work in, or alongside with others in business or nonprofits, how to promote things that are worthy causes. So I'm looking forward to doing that, is partnering with people and collaborating.
That's cool.
Yeah. So if you could say one thing to the next generation of men, what would it be?
Figure out how to rise, and that just step out and lead. I'd say read Peterson's book because it covers it, every box that we're talking about.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, any other questions from you, Jeremy?
No, I mean, I think that was good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, now we're coming up in time. Chris, thank you so much for taking the time with us. Honestly, I mean, I think there's a lot of good stuff in there, and super appreciate you sharing about your life, experience, lessons learned. It's been great having you on.
Thanks for having me, and I want to just compliment you guys for doing this and putting it out there. And I heard that you just had 1,100 downloads, so likes and shares and downloads, right, are welcomed and needed.
1,100 a month.
1,100 a month.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Congrats and good job.
Thanks.
Awesome. Well, everyone, thank you again for listening. You can find all the books that Chris mentioned at cultivateandkeep.com/favorites, and we have a section just for the books. It's where you can find 12 Rules for Life, Extreme Ownership, other ones that he mentioned, and much, much more. Otherwise, we will talk to you in the next one.